It's April 10th, 12:37 p.m. The clock is ticking, but for Kang Jiwon, time is a luxury she just doesn't have. That jerk. The thought is bitter, reflecting a marriage that's completely fallen apart. Jiwon sits alone in a cold hospital room, her only companion the blue light of her smartphone. She can't wrap her head around how her husband could just disappear when she needs him most. Her chat history with Park Min-won is a wall of green bubbles, unanswered pleas for him to pay the hospital bills he's been dodging. With only a few months left to live, Jiwon wonders if asking for him to stay by her side is really too much. Out at the nurse's station, the staff are whispering about her, noting how her husband hasn't been seen since the day she was admitted. They look over her medical chart, agreeing to take extra care of her, since it's clear she's going through this alone. One of the nurses heads over to Jiwon's room to deliver her medication, but when she opens the door, she stops dead in her tracks, eyes wide with shock. The hospital bed is empty, the sheets are cold, and Jiwon has vanished. Outside, cherry blossoms are drifting through the air, indifferent to the life fading away inside the building. A pale hand reaches out into the spring air, trying to catch a single falling petal. Spring is in full bloom, but for someone succumbing to cancer, the beauty is just a reminder of what they're losing. Jiwon is standing on the curb in her hospital pajamas, frail but determined as she hails a taxi. She watches the flowers fall, thinking they're beautiful even in their final moments. She climbs into a cab and tells the driver she needs to go to Parkview apartment. The older man behind the wheel catches her eye in the mirror and immediately senses that she's very ill. He tries to offer a bit of comfort, telling her the spring weather will have her feeling better in no time. Jiwon just stares blankly ahead, the words barely registering through her exhaustion. There's something about his voice, the accent, the warmth. It feels like she's listening to her father again. It takes her back to a time when Jiwon was still around, laughing and looking proud of her. She remembers hugging him tight as a kid, feeling safe in a way she hasn't felt in years. He'd pat her head, a simple gesture that always made everything in the world feel okay. Back in the taxi, the driver tells her to keep her head up, sensing the heavy weight she's carrying. He keeps the conversation going, trying to provide a little light for the long ride home. Jiwon doesn't share his optimism, certain that there's nothing good waiting for her tomorrow. He just smiles, telling her that she always has the power to make good things happen. The car pulls up to her apartment complex, a place that doesn't feel much like home anymore. Instead of taking her money, the driver reaches back and hands her a 10,000 won bill. He tells her to take it, saying she should think of him as a father looking out for his daughter. He promises her that she'll get back on her feet, make a fortune, and meet a man who truly loves her. Jiwon stares at him in disbelief, her cheeks flushing at the unexpected kindness from a stranger. He presses the money and a piece of candy into her hand, asking only that she promises to live a happy life. For the first time in a long time, a genuine smile touches Jiwon's lips. She stands on the sidewalk and watches as the taxi disappears into the distance. Looking down at the gift in her hand, she feels a strange sense of comfort she hasn't felt in years. In her mind, she sees Jiwon smiling back at her, as if he was the one behind the wheel all along. With the candy clutched in her hand, Jiwon turns toward the entrance of the building. She stands in front of her apartment door, her shadow casting a long, lonely shape against the metal. She pauses for a moment, steeling herself for what might be waiting for her on the other side. With a sharp click, the lock turns, and Jiwon prepares to face the reality of her home. A soft creak breaks the silence as Jiwon steps into her own home, sensing something is very wrong. Her heart sinks as she spots a pair of red high heels sitting right next to her husband's dress shoes. She freezes, the realization of what's happening making her break out in a cold sweat. Through the door, she hears voices. Someone is talking about taking a deposit and moving away. She steps over a tie discarded on the floor, hearing the woman inside ask about the amount of the deposit. Jiwon is trembling, her hand resting on the door frame as she prepares to face the ultimate betrayal. Looking inside, she sees Park Min-won and Jong Soo-min in bed together, laughing about how they'll use insurance money to start a new life. Soo-min is practically giddy when she hears they're going to get 500 million won from Jiwon's death. Min-won explains that he took out the policy the moment Jiwon started getting sick, planning for her end before it even began. The two of them are cuddling and giggling, completely unaware that the woman they're plotting against is standing right there. Jiwon's voice is barely a whisper as she says Soo-min's name, the shock turning her world upside down. The pair jumps in terror, Min-won screaming out in a panic when he sees his wife. He immediately scrambles out of bed, trying to feed her the classic lie that it's not what it looks like. Jiwon stares at him through her tears, her voice dripping with pure hatred as she calls him a bastard. She's shaking with a rage she didn't know she had, the pain of her illness replaced by the sting of betrayal. She lets out a scream, promising to make sure they can never show their faces in public ever again. She vows to make them pay back every single thing they've stolen from her. She glares at the woman she once called her best friend, telling her to forget about ever seeing a cent of that insurance money. Sumin tries to act like she's the victim, begging Jiwon to calm down because they're friends. She reaches out, trying to play on their history to keep Jiwon from exposing them. Jiwon snatches her hand back with a sneer, laughing at the sheer audacity of Sumin calling themselves friends. She can't believe Sumin would sleep with her husband while she's literally dying of cancer. Sumin drops to her knees, crying and begging Jiwon not to tell their co-workers or her family. Jiwon is disgusted that Sumin is more worried about her reputation than the fact that she just ruined someone's life. She looms over Sumin, her eyes filled with a cold, hard anger. Sumin cries that she has her whole life ahead of her and can't afford a scandal. Then her tone shifts, and she cruelly points out that Jiwon is going to die soon anyway. That's the final straw. Jiwon lunges forward and grabs Sumin by the hair, shouting that she's going to kill her. They collapse onto the floor in a heap of flailing limbs, and Sumin screams for Manhwa to help her. Manhwa roars at her to let go, his face contorted with rage as he rushes toward them. He strikes Jiwon with enough force to send her glasses flying across the room. She falls back, clutching her face in shock as her own husband turns violent. He stands over her, telling her she's as good as dead anyway and should just die quietly. Jiwon spits back that it's his fault she's in this state, blaming him and his hateful parents for everything. She screams about how they belittled her for years while he gambled away her savings and took his anger out on her. She calls him a murderer, knowing she might have lived if he hadn't delayed her medical care. With blood on her lip, she vows to take both him and his parents down to the grave with her. Her voice is raw as she pours out a lifetime of suppressed pain. She refuses to be the silent victim they want her to be. Manhwa shoves her with everything he's got, sending her staggering backward. There's a sickening thud as Jiwon's head slams into the sharp edge of the glass coffee table. She collapses onto the floor, blood pooling around her head as her life finally slips away. Park Manhwa and Jong Sumin stand frozen, staring down at Jiwon's limp body. Jiwon's eyes are glazed, a faint groan escaping her lips as life begins to fade. Thick, dark blood drips steadily from her head onto the cold floor. Manhwa and Sumin pull back in horror, the weight of what they've done finally sinking in. Manhwa leans over her, his voice trembling as he calls out her name, hoping for a response. Jiwon can feel a strange warmth spreading through her head, but her body refuses to move, paralyzed by the trauma. Sumin whispers a question, asking if she's really dead, while Manhwa tries to process the scene. Sumin heartlessly dismisses the tragedy, muttering that Jiwon was going to die soon anyway. The world around Jiwon starts to go black as she desperately tries to call for help one last time. Her broken glasses lie on the floor, a grim reminder of the doctor's prediction that she only had months left to live. But Kong Jiwon's time was cut even shorter. She died that day at the age of 37. She was never given the chance to spend her final days in peace, her life stolen by those she trusted most. In the void of death, a familiar voice calls out her name, soft and distant. The voice grows clearer, calling her name again with a warmth she hasn't felt in years. A younger version of Jiwon, dressed in her school uniform, walks through a dark, endless expanse. The voice calls her one more time, and she stops in her tracks. She turns around, the orange backpack on her shoulders shifting as she searches for the source of the voice. Her eyes light up with recognition as she calls out to her father. Young Jiwon beams with a bright, innocent smile, her face free from the pain of the future. Her father asks her for a promise, his tone gentle and full of love. He holds out his hand, a kind smile playing on his lips. He tells her that if she makes this promise, he'll give her a special present. He looks at her with such tenderness, asking her to promise him that she will live a truly happy life. Jiwon laughs and agrees without a second thought, her heart full of joy. They lock pinkies in a solemn promise as cherry blossom petals drift around them in the glowing light. A massive cherry blossom tree stands in full bloom, its petals fluttering like snow in the breeze. Jiwon whispers for her father as the vision begins to fade. Suddenly, she finds herself slumped over a desk, her head resting on her arms. A hand taps her on the shoulder, and a voice tells her that the lunch break is over. She feels a strange, comforting warmth, unlike the cold floor she remembers. She groans softly as she starts to wake up, her mind still foggy from the transition. A female coworker stands over her, noting how exhausted Jiwon looks, and asking if she even went home last night. The coworker looks at her with genuine concern, asking if she's feeling alright. She gives Jiwon a kind smile, telling her she should have taken it easy instead of overworking herself. Jiwon stares at her blankly, confused by the mention of a job she thought she'd quit 10 years ago. She suddenly jumps to her feet, her hands slamming onto the desk as a wave of shock hits her. She can't understand what's happening. She was certain she had died just moments ago. She rushes to a nearby mirror and gasps at her reflection. She looks healthy, young, and vibrant. Her mind reels as she realizes she is looking at her younger self, from a decade in the past. She stares at her hand, feeling the solid reality of her skin, her heart racing with disbelief. Images of Minwon and Sumin in that bedroom flashed before her eyes, a nightmare she thought was her final reality. Her breath hitches as she realizes she might have been given a second chance to change everything. Her hand trembles as she reaches for the pink flip phone resting on the wooden desk. She quickly grabs the device, her heart pounding as she realizes what it represents. She flips it open, staring at the outdated model with a mix of disbelief and recognition. Cold sweat beads on her forehead as the reality of her situation begins to sink in. This is her old phone, a relic from a decade ago that she thought she'd never see again. The screen displays a photo of her and Minwon from happier times, dated April 10th, the same day she died, but 10 years earlier. The horrific memories of her marriage and her own murder flash through her mind, clashing with the peaceful office around her. She reaches out to pick up her glasses, her fingers brushing against the familiar frames. As she slides the glasses onto her face, she wonders if this is all just a vivid, impossible dream. She stands frozen in the middle of the office, her mind racing to find an explanation for this miracle. Her legs give out, and she collapses back into her chair with a heavy sigh of exhaustion. A voice suddenly calls out her name, cutting through her internal chaos and pulling her back to the present. She looks up, and her blood runs cold as she sees Park Minwon standing right behind her. Her heart stops at the sight of him, the man who would eventually take her life. She lets out a visible shudder, her eyes wide with terror as she stares at his younger, unsuspecting face. She can't hide her fear, her entire body shaking at the proximity of her future killer. Unaware of her internal turmoil, Minwon smiles and asks what she's doing, holding out a cup of coffee as if everything is perfectly normal. Someone calls out Jiwon's name, snapping her out of her daze. She freezes as she realizes the man standing right in front of her is Minwon Park. Her breath hitches as she stares at him, wondering how the hell he's even here. Minwon holds a coffee and tells her he came to get her since she wasn't at her desk. He notices her trembling and mentions that she really doesn't look well. He leans in closer, asking if she's actually okay. A memory of his cruelty flashes through her mind. The man who told her she was as good as dead. Looking at his fake concerned face now, she can't help but think what a complete hypocrite he is. He offers to go grab some medicine for her, but she just glares at him with pure disgust. He reaches out and grabs her arm, demanding to know what's wrong with her. Jiwon snaps, screaming at him to let go as she shoves him away with everything she's got. She yells at him to never speak to her, or even look at her again. The commotion draws a crowd, and a woman's voice asks what's going on. The newcomer says she heard the shouting from a distance. Jiwon's heart sinks when she sees Sumin Jong walking toward her with a fake worried expression. She remembers Sumin's true colors, the girl who cried fake tears while saying Jiwon was going to die soon anyway. The sight of her best friend makes Jiwon's blood boil. She leans in and mutters a cold, "Go to hell," under her breath. Sumin stops in her tracks, completely baffled by what she just heard. A tear wells up in Jiwon's eye as the weight of the betrayal hits her all over again. She grits her teeth as Minwon tries to call out to her once more. Jiwon stands there trembling in front of the people who ruined her life. Another colleague, Ms. Yang, steps in, saying she could hear the drama from outside. She looks at Jiwon with genuine concern and asks if she's really alright. Jiwon stares back, still trying to process the fact that she's back in the office. Ms. Yang mentions that Mr. Yu is looking for her, while Jiwon just wishes she could be left alone. She pulls herself together and heads toward the office of department head Jae-hyuk. Jae-hyuk looks up from his desk and calls her name. Jiwon looks at him and realizes that while she knows who he is, he feels completely unfamiliar. She remembers him as a tall, stoic man who never said a word more than necessary. He stares at her through his glasses and reminds her that she's currently at work. Jiwon quickly apologizes, but he continues, telling her to keep her personal life separate from the office. He sets a report down and tells her the review is done, so she should get back to the project. Jiwon looks at him, surprised by his cold but professional demeanor. He hands the file back to her without showing a hint of emotion. He adds that controlling her emotions is a professional skill and not to trouble her colleagues with personal issues. Jiwon thanks him and turns to leave as quickly as possible. In her rush, her foot catches on something, and she loses her balance. She gasps as she starts to fall forward. Suddenly, a hand reaches out through the air to catch her. Jae-hyuk grabs her arm firmly, stopping her from hitting the floor. Jiwon looks up at him, stunned by the quick save. Jae-hyuk looks at her with concern, noting that she seems to be feeling dizzy. He stares at her through his glasses, his expression unreadable as he waits for her to collect herself. Jiwon quickly pulls away, stammering that she's fine before taking a cautious step back. Without another word, she turns and dashes away as fast as her legs can carry her. Jae-hyuk stands in the hallway, silently watching her retreat. He notices a report left behind on the desk near where she was standing. Jiwon rushes past her coworkers, her heart pounding as she tries to escape the tension of the office. She keeps her head down, looking completely flustered and struggling to catch her breath. She finally makes it to the elevator and frantically jams the button. The doors slide shut with a soft whir, leaving her alone in the quiet cabin for a moment. Jiwon leans against the back wall, her mind spinning with everything that just happened. She grits her teeth, desperately trying to keep her emotions from spiraling out of control. Her surroundings seem to blur into a haze of gray as she processes the strange reality she's in. She thinks back to her previous life, remembering a time when she was left alone in her pain. She realizes that back then he didn't catch her, and that things are already starting to change. A sudden gasp escapes her as the elevator reaches the ground floor and the doors open. A colleague waiting to get on asks if she's planning on leaving. Startled, she mumbles an apology and quickly scurries out into the lobby. Her feet hit the floor as she picks up the pace, determined to get out of the building. She bursts through the entrance with a sudden whoosh, desperately needing some fresh air. But in her haste, she trips over her own feet right in front of the lobby. She hits the ground with a heavy thud, gasping as the impact jars her whole body. People passing by stop and ask if she's okay, but she just scrambles to her feet with a quick apology. She can't help but wonder why she's still embarrassing herself like this, even after getting a second chance. She keeps walking, her shoes clicking against the pavement as she tries to put the office behind her. She finally clears the building entrance, emerging into the bright daylight. She leans over, panting heavily as she tries to calm her racing heart. Looking up, she realizes that it's springtime here too, with cherry blossoms blooming all around. The sight is breathtaking, a beautiful contrast to the cold hospital room she remembers. She stands there for a long moment, watching the pink petals drift through the air. Suddenly, she feels a vibration in her pocket and reaches down to investigate. She pulls out her old flip phone, the screen glowing brightly in the sun. Her heart sinks when she sees Manhwa Park displayed on the caller ID. She stares at the device, her only thought being a desperate wish for him to just leave her alone. With a sharp click, she snaps the phone shut, refusing to give him any more of her time. She stands by the bus stop, wondering where she should even go now that she has this precious time. A few minutes later, she's sitting on the bus, staring blankly out the window. The phone in her lap starts buzzing again, with Minhwan's name flashing incessantly. She ignores it, watching the city pass by in a blur of light and color. The phone buzzes one more time, but she's surprised to see the caller ID has changed to Mr. Yu. She tentatively answers, and Jae-hyuk tells her that some extra documents were sent to the team. He asks her to take a look at them tomorrow, and she quietly agrees before the call ends. On the phone, Jae-hyuk reminds Jiwon that tomorrow is Saturday, catching her off guard since she's forgotten the date. On the bus, Jiwon apologizes for the mistake and quickly snaps her phone shut with a sharp clack. As she shifts in her seat, she feels something unfamiliar in her pants pocket and reaches down to investigate. She looks down in surprise, wondering what could have ended up in her pocket without her noticing. Her eyes widen behind her glasses as she realizes she's found something significant. She pulls out a crisp 10,001 bill and a gold-wrapped candy, staring at them in disbelief. A warm memory of her father flashes through her mind, his kind face smiling as he drove her, promising that everything would be okay and that she would one day find happiness. She notices a small blue heart drawn in the corner of the bill, and the realization of who the driver was causes tears to fall. She realizes it was her father's spirit watching over her, and she breaks down into quiet, grateful sobs. She looks at the bloodstain on her pants from her earlier fall, confirming that this incredible reality is far from an illusion. Gazing at the final gift her father left her, she remembers his last promise to her, to live a happy life. In that moment, the impossible truth finally sets in. She has actually come back 10 years in time to start over. Overwhelmed by the scale of the miracle, Jiwon buries her face in her hands and cries right there on the bus. Meanwhile, back at the office, a phone screen shows a long list of outgoing calls that were never answered. Someone is staring at the device in the quiet office, frustrated by the lack of response. Park Min-won sits at his desk, staring at his phone in growing annoyance because Jiwon is ignoring his attempts to contact her. He looks over at her empty cubicle, noting that she was so flustered, she even left her handbag behind when she fled. Jong Sumin leans over the divider to ask if Jiwon is still unreachable, and Minwon tells her he'll return Jiwon's bag after work. Sumin puts on a concerned face, putting on a show of empathy by suggesting Jiwon must have just had a bad day. She then chirps up with a suggestion to get some fried chicken to take to Jiwon's house, acting the part of the perfect friend. Sumin claps her hands together, seemingly excited about the plan and how much Jiwon will appreciate it. Minwon agrees that it's a great idea and starts to suggest they leave together, his focus clearly not on work. But Jae-hyuk suddenly looms over them with a cold glare, reminding Minwon that they are still on the clock. Both of them apologize quickly as they scramble to get back to work, though Minwon secretly resents Jae-hyuk's strictness. Sumin flops back into her office chair with a sigh, her cheerful expression vanishing the moment her boss is out of sight. She picks up her own phone and stares at the screen with a growing sense of irritation at the silence. She looks through her sent folder, seeing multiple messages to Jiwon that have been left unread. Her voice drops to a cold whisper as she mutters Jiwon's name under her breath, her mask slipping. She feels insulted that her friend would dare to ignore her texts, her resentment beginning to simmer. Sumin's eyes burn with anger as she grips her phone, her friendly facade completely replaced by a dark, possessive intensity. Sumin Jong stares at her phone, seeing a message from Jiwon that she hasn't even opened yet. She can't believe Jiwon is actually leaving her on read. It's a total role reversal, and Sumin is absolutely fuming that she's being ignored. While Sumin is throwing a fit, calm Jiwon is focused on reclaiming her past. She arrives back at the apartment building she lived in 10 years ago. Stopping at the door, she remembers the old passcode she used to have. It was set to Minhwan's birthday, which just makes her want to vomit now. She decides to wipe that memory clean and change it immediately. She picks today's date instead, making it the official launch of her new life. It's a strange feeling, walking back into a place she hasn't seen in a decade. She steps into the entryway, seeing everything exactly as she left it. She looks around her old room, seeing the ghost of the woman she used to be. Her gaze lands on a photo of Sumin and a yellow duck plushie on the shelf. She remembers how Sumin used to copy her, even buying the same toys to call them friendship items. Sumin always claimed she loved everything Jiwon loved, and now Jiwon knows that included her husband. It wasn't just stuff either. Every guy Jiwon ever liked somehow ended up asking Sumin out. She doesn't want to waste any more time digging through those bitter memories. She has more important things to handle right now. She starts going through her old bank books to see where she stands. Between her house deposit and the money from her dad's funeral, she's got about 20 million won. It's a decent sum, but she's going to need a lot more to be truly independent. The catch is that she's also 20 million won in debt to the bank. She wishes she'd memorized some lottery numbers, knowing she needs to pay this off and start saving. Then, she remembers something crucial about this specific time. Back then, Park Min-won was completely obsessed with the stock market. This was right around the time when everything he touched turned to gold. His stocks were about to skyrocket, making him a fortune before he eventually blew it all. In her first life, she never saw that money. He just drained her severance and took out loans. They ended up living off her paycheck while he chased bad investments. Suddenly, her phone starts buzzing in her pocket. She checks the screen to see yet another message from Minwon. He's offering to bring over fried chicken, which is a total lie since the guy hates chicken. She's already thinking about finding a new place to live to get away from him. But before she leaves, she has to end things with him once and for all. She decides to set the terms for their meeting. She sends back a cold, short reply telling him to meet her at the pub by her place. Over at the office, Minwon is sweating, totally confused by Jiwon's sudden attitude. His boss, Jae-hyuk, catches him slacking off and calls him out for staring at his phone. Minwon panics and hands over a folder, claiming he's already sent the report. Jae-hyuk doesn't just take his word for it and starts flipping through the pages. He immediately notices a mistake, pointing out that there are only 9 samples instead of 10. Minwon grovels and promises to fix it, realizing he's just made himself look like an idiot. Jae-hyuk hands the folder back to Minwon, telling him to fix the list and bring it back as soon as possible. Minwon sighs in frustration, grumbling that Jae-hyuk only got his position because of connections and they're practically the same age. He's seething, wondering why he's being forced to do work that an entry-level employee should be handling. Suddenly, Sumin slides a note over to him. Minwon reads the note, where Sumin tells him to cheer up and promises they'll have chicken and beer later. It immediately puts a smile back on his face. He looks at Sumin, thinking she's so sweet and cute for trying to make him feel better. She's even managed to spin Jiwon's silence into a surprise visit at the pub later, and Minwon is totally on board with her plan. Minwon starts planning his exit, thinking he needs to go clean his car for Sumin's sake. He dismissively thinks that Jiwon is used to his messy car anyway, and she'd never bother to cheer him up like Sumin just did. Back at home, Jiwon is staring into her closet, feeling horrified by her past self's fashion choices. She can't believe how tacky all her old clothes are, wondering what she was even thinking back then. She stands there, scanning the racks for anything that doesn't look terrible. She realizes she didn't even used to wear makeup back then, but at least she's got youthful skin to work with. She tells herself she can't go out looking like this, especially since this is going to be her last dinner with Minwon. She decides to use a hair straightener, something she hasn't touched in a long time. Suddenly, her phone starts buzzing on the vanity. Startled, she accidentally knocks the phone off onto the floor. She goes to reach for it, But then she freezes mid-motion. A memory from 10 years ago hits her. It was a breezy spring day just like this. She remembers sitting right here, turning on the straightener and reaching for her phone. In her original life, the hot straightener fell on her wrist and left a permanent burn scar. She stares at her unblemished wrist, realizing she just avoided the injury. She picks up the phone carefully, feeling a surge of relief. Looking at her skin, she confirms that the past isn't set in stone. She knows now that with her knowledge of the future, she can truly change her fate. She reads the latest message from Manhwa, where he says he's on his way with the present. She knows exactly what that present is, and she's not falling for his fake kindness. She looks out the window, imagining Sumin popping out and acting like her presence is a gift. Back then, she had no idea how well those two actually got along behind her back. But now she knows everything, and she's already formulated the perfect revenge. She looks down at them in the car, thinking about the pathetic love they were so desperate to protect that they murder her for it. She decides to give them exactly what they want. She watches Sumin laughing in the passenger seat, oblivious to what's coming. Jiwon's eyes turn dark as she settles on her ultimate goal. She doesn't just want to leave. She wants Sumin to marry Manhwa in her place. Jiwon stops in her tracks as a realization hits her. Looking at the two people who betrayed her, she finally lands on the perfect plan for revenge. She grins, deciding to let them have the pitiful love they were so desperate for. Sumin laughs in the car, having no idea what's coming. Manhwa drives, focused only on himself as usual. Jiwon grips her phone, her expression hardening behind her glasses. Her goal is simple. She's going to make Sumin marry Manhwa in her place. She waits at a local pacha as the nightlife starts to pick up. Jiwon looks up when she hears her name called out. Manhwa and Sumin walk in together, acting like they just happened to run into each other. Sumin waves with a fake sweet smile, announcing that drinks are on her tonight. Manhwa claims Sumin was just worried about her, while she quickly pulls up a chair. He hands Jiwon the menu and asks how she's feeling. Jiwon suggests ordering some chicken feet and fish cake soup. Sumin acts hesitant, pretending she's not sure about the choice. Manhwa pours the drinks as Sumin claims she loves everything Jiwon loves. Jiwon's gaze drifts to Sumin's floral earrings. She remembers when Sumin gifted her the same pair, knowing they looked terrible on her. Manhwa mentions how surprised he was that they were friends since they look so different. Sumin winks and complains about how she's still small and stuck wearing frilly clothes. She calls Jiwon a giant, and Jiwon immediately recognizes the backhanded compliment. Manhwa looks on, seemingly amused by the conversation. Sumin grabs his hand, comparing its size to Jiwon's in another attempt to make herself seem fragile. She sighs about wanting to be a beautiful giant, while Jiwon downs her drink. Jiwon points out they ate the same cafeteria food, so it's weird that Sumin is so much shorter. Sumin stammers, caught off guard by the logical comeback. She quickly suggests they all raise their glasses to change the subject. Manhwa toasts to their first time drinking together as a trio. Jiwon joins in, curious to see where Sumin's little act leads. The glasses clink, but Jiwon knows exactly how fake this friendship really is. When the chicken feet arrive, Sumin makes a face and calls them gross. Jiwon starts eating anyway, enjoying the meal despite the company. Sumin acts like she's just happy to see Jiwon enjoying herself. Jiwon calls her out, reminding her she drank 3 bottles of soju with her just the other day. Sumin laughs nervously, unable to keep her story straight. The server brings over a steaming pot of fish cake soup. Sumin tells the server to put the pot down on their table. A man accidentally bumps into the server as she's setting it down. The hot soup splashes out of the pot. Jiwon clutches her arm as the server panics over the accident. The server apologizes repeatedly and rushes off to get ice. Jiwon stares at her red, throbbing wrist, realizing the burn is in the exact same spot as her previous life. Sumin reaches out to help, but Jiwon instinctively recoils. She snatches her arm away before Sumin can make contact. Her rejection is sharp and immediate, surprising everyone at the table. Jiwon excuses herself to the restroom to deal with the pain. Looking down, she sees the fresh red mark on her skin from the hot soup. She recalls how she tripped in front of the elevator in her past life, leading to the same result. Even though the cause changed from a hair straightener to soup, the injury is identical. She wonders if this means her fate is sealed and she's destined to marry Manhwa again. Alone at the sink, she tries to process the terrifying consistency of these events. The thought of history repeating itself haunts her as she stares at her reflection. She clutches her burnt wrist, the weight of her situation starting to sink in. Looking into the mirror, she vows to find a way to break the cycle. Back at the table, Sumin is already back to her usual antics, acting giggly and tipsy. She plays up her drunk persona, trying to charm Manhwa while Jiwon watches in silence. Jiwon knows Sumin is just using her flushed cheeks to her advantage. Sumin leans in and asks Manhwa what exactly he sees in Jiwon. Jiwon clenches her fist, barely keeping her composure as she listens to the question. Minwon gives a generic compliment about her being smart, while Sumin pretends to be happy for her. Jiwon scoffs at the forced friendship, her patience finally reaching its limit. Sumin asks for a piece of fish cake with a wide, innocent smile. Instead of handing it over, Jiwon shoves a large piece of food into Sumin's mouth to shut her up. Sumin starts coughing, caught completely off guard by the aggressive move. Claiming Sumin is too drunk to stay, Jiwon drags her up from her seat. She quickly hails a taxi, ignoring Sumin's weak protests that she's fine. Jiwon loads her into the car and gives the driver the address for Silim. She slams the door shut with a satisfying thud, effectively ending the charade. Watching the cab drive away, Jiwon wonders why she ever let this woman control her life. She waves goodbye with a cold smile, glad to finally have some breathing room. Back at the table, Minwon takes another drink, seemingly unbothered by the sudden departure. He comments on how fun it was drinking with Sumin, clearly falling for her act. Minwon notes that Jiwon isn't usually this sweet or cute compared to her friend. He continues to brag about Sumin being a lightweight who can't handle her liquor. Jiwon scoffs internally as she opens another bottle, ready to move to the next phase of her plan. She surprises Minwon by pouring him a drink first, a rare gesture of attention. Removing her glasses, she claims there's something on the lens, revealing her face. Minwon is momentarily stunned, telling her she looks much better without them. Jiwon plays along, mentioning she might get LASIK next year if she gets a raise. She gives him a soft, calculated smile, baiting him into the conversation. She then casually mentions that she's thinking about investing in the stock market. Minhwan's interest is piqued, surprised that she's finally curious about finances. She asks him to teach her, playing into his ego as if he's an expert. They toast to their new partnership, with Minwon completely unaware he's being played. As their dinner concludes, a final, awkward silence hangs over the table. Outside, Minwon thanks Jiwon for the help with his bag as they part ways for the night. He catches her off guard with a sudden forehead kiss, a gesture that feels entirely unwanted. Turning away the second he leaves, Jiwon's expression shifts to one of absolute revulsion. She makes it back to her apartment, the silence of the dark room finally offering some peace. Falling back onto her sofa, she retrieves her flip phone and flips it open with a clap. She lies there for a moment, the glow of the screen illuminating her weary face. She plays back the secret recording of their dinner, hearing Minwon detail his stock picks. The recording continues with him bragging about various electronics and pharmaceutical companies. Listening to his insights on undervalued corporations, Jiwon can't help but thank him for his stupidity. As he reveals information about a new IPO, a clever, knowing smile spreads across her face. She closes her eyes, resolved to use this information as the alimony she's owed for a lifetime of suffering. Minhwan's voice filters through the phone as he goes on about his latest stock market picks. Jiwon is recording the entire conversation, making sure she doesn't miss a single detail. He mentions companies like J Pharma and Deoxin Panel, claiming the timing is perfect to buy in. She lies back on her couch, listening to him ramble about a video game company that's about to go public. Staring at the screen, she realizes this insider info is the alimony she's owed from her previous life. To get some space, she sends him a text saying she's still feeling sick and needs to stay home. She snaps her phone shut with a satisfied click. Soon, she's standing in front of a shelf full of investment guides at a bookstore. She picks up a book, hoping to finally understand how the market actually works. Jiwon flips through the pages, but the technical terms are a lot to process. It's all just jargon to her at this point. She closes the book, deciding she needs something much more basic to start with. She looks up and spots a book titled Stock Market Basics on the very top shelf. She reaches out, her fingertips just barely brushing against the spine of the book. It's way too high for her to reach comfortably. She gives it one last try, straining her arm as much as she can. Suddenly, a man's hand reaches right over her and pulls the book down effortlessly. She turns around to thank the stranger, but the words die in her throat. The man asks if she's really planning on quitting her job. Jae Hyuk stands there, holding the book and looking right at her. Jiwon is stunned to see her boss here, stumbling over his name. He keeps staring at the book's subtitle, and she frantically waves her hands to deny she's quitting. Jae Hyuk looks stern, and she begins to worry that she's already managed to upset him. She claims she's just interested because Minwon is into stocks, then tries to make a quick exit. He stops her to ask if she's on her way to meet Minwon right now. She puts a finger to her lips and asks him to keep their meeting a secret. When he asks why, she admits that she told her boyfriend she was homesick. Jae Hyuk looks her over and asks if she's actually feeling unwell. He stares at her, waiting for an answer. She explains she just wanted some time alone this weekend, then asks what he was about to say before. He turns back to the shelf, but she can tell he's holding something back. He looks back at her over the rim of his glasses. He tells her that her new earrings actually look good on her. Then he adds that the ones she used to wear never really suited her style. She thinks back to the gaudy jewelry Sumin always pressured her to wear. It hits her that Jae Hyuk was the only person who ever told her the truth about them. She gives him a quick bow, thanking him before saying she'll see him at work. She hurries away, feeling completely flustered by the conversation. Jae-hyuk remains at the shelf, watching her walk out of the store. Monday morning arrives, and the office clock shows it's only 7:23 a.m. Jiwon walks through the empty lobby, heading for the elevators. She settles into her desk, determined to get as much work done as possible before everyone else arrives. Jiwon notices someone sitting in the dark and realizes it's her boss. She's surprised to see Jae-hyuk in the office this early. She creeps closer, her footsteps almost silent. He's slumped back in his chair, completely knocked out, with his arms crossed and his eyes shut. He looks like he's been there all night. She leans over the partition to get a better look. Jiwon thinks that if he was this tired, he probably shouldn't have bothered coming in so early. She stands there for a beat, just watching him sleep. Up close, she can't help but notice how incredibly clear his skin is. Jae-hyuk starts to stir, flinching as he wakes up. Still a bit groggy, he blurs out her name, which makes her jump. Jiwon is caught off guard as he finally opens his eyes. He quickly puts his glasses on and gets back to business, asking what she's doing here so early. She gives a nervous laugh and makes an excuse about making up for her early exit on Friday. Back at her desk, she can't shake the fact that he just called her Jiwon instead of Miss Kong. She quickly refocuses, telling herself she has bigger things to worry about. She looks at her stock books, remembering how Manhwa bragged about his J Pharma shares. She checks the current price. It's sitting at about 8,001 per share. She knows that in just 1 month, that price is going to explode. There's no time to lose. She has to make her move right now. Jae-hyuk walks up to her desk and comments on how hard she's working. He drops off a sandwich and a drink, telling her to have some breakfast when she's hungry. Jiwon is shocked by the gesture and stutters out a quick thanks. She realizes she usually turns people down, but decides she needs to stop being so defensive. She looks up and gives him a big, appreciative smile. As she looks at the food, she tells herself that she deserves a break and some good luck for once. Jae-hyuk just stares at her for a second. He gives a curt reply and heads off, leaving her a bit confused. She wonders if he actually just scowled at her for being nice. She turns back to her computer, deciding that the guy is a total mystery. Regardless of his mood, she has to focus on what matters most. By 8:23 a.m., she's already finished her meal and is ready to get to work. A few minutes later, she logs into her brokerage account. At 8:29 a.m., she sets everything up for her big purchase. Right at 8:30 a.m., she places the order for over 2,500 shares. It cost her 20 million won, which is pretty much her entire life savings. At 8:36 a.m., Ms. Yang walks in and waves hello. A few minutes later, Mr. Kim arrives and starts talking to Jae-hyuk. They both head into a meeting room to go over some reports. Then, at 8:45 a.m., the two people she despises most show up together. Minwon and Sumin are all smiles, pretending their joint arrival was just a total coincidence. They claim they just happened to run into each other right outside the building. Sumin spots Jiwon at her desk and gives her a cheery morning greeting. Jiwon doesn't return the warmth, firmly telling Sumin to stick to formal names while they're at work. Minwon tells her to relax because they're all close friends, then comments that she seems to be feeling better today. He looks at the clear cup on her desk, pointing out that she usually only ever drinks sweet cappuccinos. Jiwon takes a sip, thinking that the girl who liked sweet drinks died 10 years ago in her previous timeline. She thinks to herself that bitter coffee is actually Jae-hyuk's style, while Minwon keeps talking about her habits. She keeps her eyes fixed on her screen, admitting to herself that she has come to love the aroma of a plain Americano. She glances over at Minwon as he starts typing, thinking about what a complete jerk he really is. Hearing the rapid clicks of his mouse, she's certain that he's already busy buying up shares. She decides to walk past his desk, curious to see how much he's actually investing. She approaches quietly, keeping her expression neutral as she passes behind him. She catches a glimpse of his screen, which is currently displaying his active trading portfolio. She peeks over his shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she tries to make out the numbers. To her horror, she sees that he isn't buying more. He's clicking the sell button for thousands of shares. Jiwon stands there in stunned silence, while Minwon looks incredibly pleased with himself. As the clock hits 9 a.m., she can't understand why he's dumping the stock right as the market opens. Panic begins to set in as she watches him finalize the transaction. She's left with one terrifying thought. If Minwon just sold all his J Pharma stock, maybe the future has already changed. Park Minwon is glued to his screen, watching the market numbers tick. Kong Jiwon watches him from across the office, totally caught off guard by what she sees. It's barely 9 in the morning, and she's already wondering why he's making a move so early. To her shock, Minwon just dumped every single share of his J Pharma stocks. He has no idea Jiwon is standing right behind him, calculating his every move. In her past life, those stocks were supposed to hit the moon in just a few weeks. Jiwon starts to sweat, wondering if her attempt to rewrite her fate has already changed the future. Usually, her boyfriend is the lucky one who always ends up on top, but now, he's officially put in the order to cash out all 3,500 shares. She can't wrap her head around why he'd sell the second she decided to buy in for herself. Jiwon tries to play it cool when he turns around, hiding her nerves behind a nervous smile. Manhwa starts bragging about some good news he picked up over the weekend. He brings up a company called MW Technology, and Jiwon's heart sinks as she recognizes the name. He leans in close, acting like he's letting her in on a billion-dollar secret. The guy whispers that their stocks are about to skyrocket after a big partnership. She knows the real ending. The stocks will surge, then the CEO will vanish with everyone's money. He's so confident in this scam that he doesn't even see her grimace. Watching him walk away, Jiwon realizes that by changing her own past, she's altering his. She watches him check his watch, thinking about how one person's change impacts everyone's future. Looking at her reflection in the glass, she wonders if she's literally stolen his good luck. She breaks the silence by asking Manhwa if he's ready to grab some lunch. Jiwon keeps the act up, flashing a bright smile as she says she's heading to the cafeteria. But underneath the polite surface, she's preparing for a confrontation. The three of them head down to the cafeteria together, with Sumin tagging along. Manhwa is confused by Jiwon's sudden seriousness, wondering why she stopped smiling. Sumin is her usual bubbly self, acting like everything is perfectly normal. Sumin points out the white blouse, asking if it's a new purchase. Jiwon looks at the red soup being served, knowing exactly what's coming next. In her memories, this very blouse was ruined by a spill that Sumin blamed on being clumsy. The group moves through the cafeteria lunch line together. Sumin makes sure to ask the server for an extra-large helping of the messy kimchi stew. She follows Jiwon closely, putting on her best sweet friend act. They spot Manhwa already waiting for them at a table across the room. Sumin glances back, checking to see if the coast is clear for her move. She waits for the perfect moment to strike while Jiwon's back is turned. She lets out a fake shout, launching her tray forward with a crash. The bowl flips, sending the red soup flying through the air. But Jiwon is ready this time. She ducks out of the way with perfect timing. Instead of hitting Jiwon, the entire bowl of stew splatters right across Manhwa's white shirt. Sumin immediately goes into damage control mode, apologizing like her life depends on it. She rushes over to him, acting devastated by her own clumsiness. Manhwa tries to laugh it off, but he's dying inside over his ruined $900 shirt. Sumin puts on her best worried face, but Park Manhwa is way too distracted by his ruined shirt to notice her performance. Instead of letting Sumin play the victim, calm Jiwon tells her to stop just standing around and go get some tissues. Sumin is visibly stunned by how blunt her friend is being, especially since it was her accident that caused the mess. Manhwa is absolutely crushed. That shirt was his favorite, and Jiwon knows exactly why he's so upset. As Sumin rushes off, Jiwon notes that it's the same anniversary gift she bought him in the past, another fixed point in time. Sumin finally returns, panting slightly as she holds out a wad of tissues for her oppa to use. Manhwa heads off to the restroom to clean up, and Jiwon decides she needs a break from the table too. While Jiwon is at the sinks, she hears a frantic knocking coming from one of the stalls. She's a bit startled when a voice from inside asks if there's anyone out there who can help. The person inside sounds desperate, begging for a favor from whoever is listening on the other side of the door. Jiwon pieces it together and asks the stranger if she needs a feminine hygiene product. The relief in the girl's voice is immediate, and she thanks Jiwon for being a literal lifesaver. Jiwon doesn't just give her a pad, she slides her whole pouch under the door and even offers a cardigan to cover any leaks. A hand reaches out and quickly snatches the bag, clearly embarrassed but incredibly grateful. From behind the door, the girl lets out a huge sigh of relief, thanking her over and over. A few minutes later, a young woman steps out, looking incredibly thankful and relieved to be out of that situation. Jiwon recognizes her immediately. It's Yu, the youngest member of their team. Hyun explains that she left her phone at her desk and thought she was going to be stuck there forever. She also mentions that someone else had come in earlier, but completely ignored her pleas for help. Jiwon is shocked. She can't imagine someone being heartless enough to just leave a colleague stranded like that. Hyun isn't dwelling on the bad luck, though. She's just glad she met an angel like Jiwon. Since they're both already there, Jiwon invites the new recruit to join them for lunch at their table. As they walk back to the cafeteria, Hyun mentions she knows exactly the type of person who would ignore a cry for help. She suspects that person is out there right now, pretending to be the nicest person in the world. Back at the table, Sumin is doing exactly that, putting on her most angelic act for Manhwa's benefit. She's leaning in, soaking up all the attention while they wait for Jiwon to return. Manhwa is completely fooled, telling Sumin that she's such a wonderful and caring person. Sumin suddenly remembers something and starts telling a story about her recent trip to the restroom. In reality, Sumin is fuming, wondering why Jiwon has become so difficult to handle lately. She remembers seeing her friend at the sinks and feeling a strange shift in their usual dynamic. Her memory shows the truth. Hyun had asked for help while Sumin was right there in the restroom. But Sumin didn't have a kind bone in her body. She just looked annoyed by the interruption. Instead of helping, she complained about having a bad day and walked out on her coworker. Back in the present, Sumin lies through her teeth, claiming she found someone stuck and helped them. She even adds extra details about how grateful the person was for her heroic assistance. Sumin is mid-sentence when Jiwon finally walks up and casually announces she's back. Jiwon leans in with a knowing look, asking Sumin to finish what she was saying about her good deed. Sumin doesn't skip a beat, flashing a sweet smile as she continues her fabricated story. She goes on about how happy she was to lend a helping hand to someone in need. Jiwon keeps it cool, standing there with her tray and letting Sumin dig her own grave. Then, Jiwon steps aside to reveal the person she was actually with this whole time. Sumin's face goes pale, and she nearly chokes when she realizes Hyun is standing right there. Kang Jiwon returns to the table with Hyun, introducing her to the group with a casual, friendly air. Young Sumin is visibly taken aback, her plans for a cozy lunch with Manhwa suddenly disrupted by the newcomer. Jiwon leans in and pointedly asks Sumin to continue the interesting story she was telling right before they arrive. The quartet begins their lunch, but the silence that follows is thick with unspoken tension and Sumin's visible annoyance. Sumin sits quietly, her eyes filled with a simmering resentment as she watches Hyun effortlessly charm the table. Park Min-won is surprised by the sudden friendship between Jiwon and the new girl, wondering how it happened so fast. Jiwon pointedly mentions that the soup-stained shirt was an expensive anniversary gift, making sure the loss is felt. Min-won tries to play it cool, laughing off the disaster, while Sumin seethes with frustration in the background. Hyun dives into her meal with gusto, prompting Min-won to internally judge her for her unladylike appetite. Unaware of the judgment, Hyun happily shares a bit of her grandfather's wisdom about the importance of eating well. Sumin can't help but take a passive-aggressive jab, questioning if Hyun's grandfather actually achieved anything great. Hyun takes the bait in stride, explaining that her grandfather's stew and side dish business is quite popular. Sumin's internal reaction is one of immediate superiority, looking down on Hyun for her family's humble business. Jiwon watches the exchange with a keen eye, fully aware that Sumin is trying to belittle and embarrass the new girl. She's not quite sure if Hyun is genuinely oblivious to the insults or if she's just choosing to ignore them. Feeling the awkwardness of the meal, Min-won excuses himself early to head back to his desk for work. Once the men are gone, Jiwon suggests the three of them head to the cafe to grab some drinks. She insists on being the one to pay, reminding them that as their senior colleague, it's her treat to give. Hyun is absolutely thrilled, clapping her hands together and excitedly ordering a hot cappuccino. The three women prepare to head back to the office, but the dynamic between them is far from friendly. Jiwon walks ahead, leaving Sumin and Hyun to navigate the tense walk back to the elevators together. Hyun notices the cardigan Sumin is holding and realizes it belongs to Jiwon, the woman who helped her. She asks Sumin when she and Jiwon became so close, noting that she's never seen them speak before today. As she presses the elevator button, Hyun continues her line of questioning, making Sumin increasingly uncomfortable. She casually mentions that it was actually Jiwon who came to her rescue in the restroom earlier that day. The realization hits Sumin like a physical blow. Her elaborate lie about helping the girl has been completely exposed. She realizes that she was the one who ignored Hyun's plea for help, and the new girl knows exactly who she is. Panic turns to defensive malice as Sumin tries to paint Jiwon as nosy and overbearing to save herself. She warns Hyun to keep her distance, claiming that Jiwon only helps people to satisfy her own ego. Sumin continues her attempt at character assassination, insisting she knows the real Jiwon better than anyone. She puts on a concerned, sisterly act, pretending she's only sharing this warning for Hyun's own good. Hyun doesn't buy the act for a second, retorting that real nosiness is judging someone's family business. She confronts Sumin directly, asking why she didn't just help her in the restroom if she's so caring. Without waiting for a response, Hyun walks into the elevator, leaving Sumin standing alone in the hallway. Sumin is left speechless, her face flushed with humiliation as the elevator doors close on her defeat. She trembles with rage, unable to believe that the new girl had the audacity to call her out so publicly. Her mind spirals with fear. If Hyun tells the rest of the team about her lies, her reputation will be destroyed. A voice calls out to her, and Sumin is forced to quickly mask her anger as a manager. Mr. Kim approaches. Mr. Kim greets her with a bright smile, completely oblivious to the fact that Sumin was just humiliated. He begins to shower her with compliments, contrasting her feminine beauty with the other women on the team. Seeing a potential ally, Sumin immediately reverts to her fake, sugary sweet persona to win him over. She plays the part of the misunderstood victim, making Mr. Kim feel like he's the only one who truly understands her. Mr. Kim is eager to help Sumin, telling her she can share anything with him and he'll be there for her. Sumin puts on a sad, vulnerable face, telling Mr. Kim she needs someone to talk to but doesn't feel comfortable in the office. Leaning in close, Sumin whispers an invitation for a drink after work, leaving Mr. Kim completely flustered and blushing. Back at her desk, Jiwon checks her phone, reflecting on the day's events and the changes she's made. She wonders if the smoothie she bought will be enough of a lunch, considering she skipped the cafeteria to avoid more drama. Jiwon realizes that by changing small details, she has successfully altered the course of the future once more. She thinks about how Minwon sold his stocks early and how Sumin's soup ended up on his shirt instead of her own. Her plan to deflect Sumin's clumsiness onto Minwon worked perfectly, shifting the bad luck away from herself. As her phone buzzes, Jiwon feels a sense of control, her theory about stealing someone else's luck now a proven rule. Jiwon stands tall, feeling empowered by her knowledge of the future and the massive advantage it gives her in this life. Meanwhile, Sumin's thoughts are much darker as she smiles, secretly scheming to get Jiwon kicked out of the company. Jiwon's expression hardens with determination. She is no longer the victim and won't let anyone steal her life again. Looking around the quiet office, Jiwon notices that most of her colleagues haven't returned from lunch yet. She spots Yoo Jae-hyuk at his desk, seemingly asleep in his chair once again in the middle of the day. Approaching him quietly, Jiwon whispers that she brought him a smoothie as a thank you for his earlier help. She watches him for a moment, wondering if he's simply exhausted from overworking or if there's more to his fatigue. Her quiet moment is shattered when Park Minwon suddenly appears, grabbing her arm and demanding to know what she's doing. Jiwon is caught off guard by Minhwan's sudden aggression and his suspicious, accusing glare. She struggles against his grip, shouting for him to let her go as he pulls on her arm with force. Before the situation can escalate further, a hand reaches out and firmly catches Minhwan's wrist midair. Yoo Jae-hyuk has intervened, standing protectively between Jiwon and the aggressive Minhwan with a stern look. Minhwan is stunned to see Jae-hyuk getting involved, his face full of shock at being confronted by the department head. Jiwon looks between the two men, feeling flustered as the tension in the office reaches a breaking point. Jae-hyuk tightens his grip on Minhwan's wrist, his gaze cold as he demands an explanation for his behavior toward Jiwon.